I'm going to be tying up a streamer pattern today. This is called the Murdich Minnow. I had a follower reach out a while back and asked me about doing a video for this, and this time of year works out well because in central Indiana it's getting to be streamer season for the smallmouth. Murdich Minnow was originally tied for stripers, but has become kind of a staple for smallmouth. It's a pretty straightforward fly to tie. It can be a little bit tricky, but it's got a lot of flash in it, a lot of movement. I like to tie them in about a 3 to 4 inch long pattern this time of year, but earlier in the year I might tie some of these in about 1 to 2 inch patterns. That's the Murdich Minnow, and I'll go ahead and get started. Start the Murdich Minnow by placing our hook in the vise. This is a Tiemco 8089 and a size 10. You want to debarb the hook. Then before we attach our thread, I want to rough the shank of the hook up with a file. You know, a file, emery board or something like that would work. This is just going to help take the coating on the outside of the hook off and just make it a little bit rougher so that the thread and the underlying material that make up the underbody, I should say, of this will grip the hook a little bit more and has less of a tendency to rotate on the hook shank. If these flies are tied loosely, then after fishing them for a while and catching fish, the bodies tend to kind of break away from the shank and they tend to rotate around. I'm going to add a little bit of Zap-A-Gap CA glue along the hook shank there. For thread, I'm using a Veevus 200 denier GPS thread. I'm going to attach my thread just in front of the point of the hook. Go backwards just a little bit to attach that thread. Cut the excess off. Then I'm going to advance my thread forward and put a base layer of thread along the hook shank and then back down. This will really grip the hook shank, plus that CA glue will really hold it nice and tight for the underbody. The tail is made of 3 different parts, the first being some bucktail. This is just some white bucktail. Get maybe about, as far as pencil diameters go, maybe 1/4 to 1/2 a pencil in diameter. You don't have to have it really thick, but what you do want is some nice long fibers. I like to make the Murdich minnows, especially for the fall season, about 2.5 times the shank of the hook. So the resulting bait fish is going to end up being about 4 inches. Past your tie-in spot, you want to cut this off at a steep angle. Shouldn't say steep, shallow angle. And that's just so that our underbody has a bit of a taper to it. We don't want to really bulk all that up. After I get that collected on the hook shank, I'm going to start putting a few wraps in to really kind of crank down on that. Again, wanting to make certain that that does not spin. It won't break away and spin along the hook shank. The Flashabou that's used for this is a pearl Flashabou. This is just a plain old pearl Flashabou and a silver holographic Flashabou. I'm going to take the pearl and I'm going to place it along the hook. I want the ends of the Flashabou to be the length of the tail. I'm going to wrap this forward to about halfway up the hook shank. Come back, and then I'm going to fold all of this over to complete the pearl Flashabou. I'm going to trim this off, but I don't want it all to be the same length, so I'm just going to trim all of that different lengths and then secure that Flashabou. I'm going to help this transition along a little bit, so I'm going to try and smooth this out. I'm using a holographic silver Flashabou for the silver portion of this. You could use just a regular silver if you want. I like the holographic. It has a little bit more flash to it. I'm going to tie this in just like the previous one. I want it the full length. Not that it's actually the case, but this is one of those flies that I almost think you can't put too much flash in. I'm going to wrap that down maybe 3/4, so you're maybe 2 eye lengths behind the eye of the hook. And I'm just going to leave that hang. We're going to fold that back in a moment. Throughout making this fly, I like to put a little bit of head cement along all those thread wraps and materials just to kind of soak in and help secure it. This fly has what's usually termed as kind of wings on it, but it's not like a wing in the traditional sense of a fly where it's up along the back. Uses I'm using some EP fibers. This is some white EP fibers for the wings on this, and what they are is a bit of a transition from the bulkier body up front to the tail. If you take those EP fibers and kind of roll them like this, that's how you can kind of judge how many you have. I've got maybe half a pencil, third of a pencil, something like that here. It's not critical because you're going to kind of spread this out a little bit. I want to tie this in so that the ends are just past the bend of the hook, maybe 1/4 of a hook length. I'm going to secure this down to the hook with about 3 or 4 wraps. Then I'm going to push down with my thumb, kind of pinch it, and what this does is it helps to spread out those fibers and roll those out on top of the hook shank and under the hook shank a little bit. You don't need to have them around the hook shank because I'm going to tie another clump of this over on the other side of the hook. I want to cut these also at a steep angle because I want to try and keep that taper going in the body. Turning the fly over, I'm going to tie in those EP fibers on the other side. Again, putting in 3 or 4 wraps, not super tight, just enough to collect them, and then pinching, scooching that around a little bit. I want to get those fibers to spread around just a little bit there. Like before, I'm going to trim this at kind of a steep angle so I don't end up bulking that body up front too much. And then I'm going to wrap that down. you can see it's very easy to let this get away from you and end up with the body getting overly bulky. My thread back at the end of the body, which now you'll probably note has gone back a little bit, is between the point of the hook and the barb of the hook. I'm going to take the silver Flashabou in front and I'm going to fold it over. I like to lay it out flat across the top so it spreads out a little bit. Secure that in. Then we're going to trim this short, and I generally, some people like it just about the length of the wings pieces here. I generally like it about halfway down the tail. And again, I'm trimming those so that they're going to be different lengths. Now you just want to secure all that material on that underbody, and you want to smooth this transition out right here. When you go to wrap in the body material, if you're not careful, you can end up with a gap in the body material because of that transition right here if it's too abrupt. So we'll just clean that up, smooth that up a little bit, bring my thread all the way back. Put on some more head cement. I don't mind being kind of generous with the head cement here because as we wrap on the body, it will absorb up into that and hold it and make it a little more secure. The body on this traditionally was tied with a pearl Estaz, which I'm not certain if they're making anymore. Anyway, I'm using a pearl chenille. This is a Wapsi product, and this is just a regular pearl chenille. You want to cut yourself a fairly good length, maybe about a foot or so. Take the fibers out of the ends right here so you have the nice core fibers, solid core fibers to lash down. Wrap those in real well and advance your thread to just behind the eye of the hook. Here it's just a matter of wrapping in that chenille for the body, and then each wrap's going to go right in front of the other one, as well as each wrap you want to sweep the fibers on the sides and the top back. About every 3 or 4 wraps, I like to brace the whole fly, really pull on that chenille so that it's really tight down along that underbody. And then you just keep advancing forward up to your thread. You get up to the eye of the hook, go ahead and tie off the pearl chenille and trim away the excess. Try and brush some of those fibers back as you just wrap a few wraps behind the eye of the hook to secure it. And then we'll put in a 4 or 5 turn whip finish. Trim away the excess, and then put some head cement all around that head right there. Again, you really want to get some head cement down in there to soak in and secure it. So we're almost done with our Murdich Minnow. We've got a little bit of coloring to do and some eyes to put on. I am rubbing the body material from the back to the front because throughout the process of wrapping it, I'm sweeping it back this way and kind of laying it down. I want to get it more perpendicular, get it sticking out. The nice thing is that the underbody, you notice we have that taper that I mentioned with all that material. That works for us because the underbody kind of causes the whole fly to have a little bit of a taper. It's a little bulkier back here and narrows up towards the front. And then the EP fibers help with that in terms of the overall profile ends up becoming more of a streamlined minnow. So at this stage, we're going to color the back of the Murdich Minnow. I'm using a Copic marker. This is a manganese blue. At the same time, you don't have to have this marker. You can use a Sharpie. You can go with a olive. You can go with a blue. You can go with a gray. Whatever is going to work in your waters. But what I like to do is I just take the fine point and I go down into the fibers and I make certain I get a nice stripe right along the very back here. And the reason for that is because all of your bait fish, if you look at them, their transition from a light color to a dark color, it's the very, very top that is the darkest. And that's because if something is looking down on the fly, or excuse me, on the minnow or something like this in the water, then it will blend in with the bottom of the river or the lake or whatever. I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit right on this Flashabou and the wing right here along there. Now, I'm going to take the marker and holding it kind of at an angle like this from the back to the sides. I'm just going to brush it back and forth. I'm not concerned about getting it real deep because what I want is more of a transition from a nice pronounced dark here to a little bit lighter. And that's just how I do it. It works for me. I'm not looking for an exact replica. I'm just looking for a representation. So I'm going to let that dry, and then we're going to put our eyes on. For the eyes on these, I'm using a 5/16 3D pearl eyes on these. And for the adhesive on this, I'm using a product, it's called an E6000. And the E6000 it's kind of like a goop. It's kind of like a rubber cement, I suppose. But what you're going to do is you're going to take a generous dollop of the E6000, say on your bodkin, like this. And you're going to place it right on the side, kind of pushing some of that down into the underlying fibers as you roll it off like that. Because what you're looking for is to get a fair bit of cement down in there, and you want it down into the fibers, but you also want it to stay out on the top just a little bit. The E6000 is nice. A lot of people will use Zap-A-Gap gel. I find that it ends up being rather hard in terms of using it when the eyes are actually glued onto the material. It tends to be rather hard, crusty, and it can crack and break off. The E6000, being more of I guess a rubber silicone type material, has a little bit more give to it. Now when we place these on, I want to make certain, try and do this so you can see it, that the eyes go on right on top. And I'm going to use a half hitch tool or something like that I can just push down a little bit here. I don't want them tight along the body. I actually want them to stay out just a little bit. One got twisted a little. So you just want to push those down into the E6000 material, that adhesive, and then they'll spring back, and that's fine. Takes maybe about half an hour, I'm going to say, for that material to fully set up. But I just find that it's a little bit softer, I guess. It just works a little bit better for me. So once those are set up, our Murdich Minnow is done. This is a fly that will definitely get beaten up, but it still fishes very, very well. As long as you put it together well, it'll hold up real, real well. So that's the Murdich Minnow. Fantastic bait fish pattern. As I said, it was originally tied for stripers, but has become a de facto smallmouth fly in about the last 10 years or so. You can tie these up in different colors. I will tie them up in a bluish color like this, or even gray, as well as an olive color. Does very, very well. You can also tie these up in a shorter version. So if I, instead of wanting, say, a 3 to 4 inch bait fish, I only wanted a 2-inch bait fish, I can either go with this hook or a little bit smaller hook, and then you can actually trim these fibers back to get a smaller profile on the body and use some smaller eyes. But this time of year, I like to throw some bigger streamers for the smallmouth, and 3 or 4 inch is not out of the ordinary. Anyway, that's the Murdich Minnow. I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for joining me at Device today. I hope you learned at least a new pattern, if not a new technique, maybe a tip or trick here and there. If you have any questions about this fly or any of the techniques used in constructing this pattern, please leave them in the comments section down below. If you go to the trouble to ask a question, I'll go to the trouble to answer it. If you'd like to help Dressed Irons, please share this video with your friends and anybody you think that might enjoy this pattern. Until next time, remember, it's fly tying. If you're not having fun, then you're doing it wrong.